and they require significant reforms in order to reach the potential of being the place where cities can access a significant amount of capital in local currency. Now, in our visits to different countries, especially in emerging markets, many times the conversation is about the debt distress at the national level. And today you heard Honorable Mayor saying that we don't have the financial ecosystem that allows cities to access finance due to debt status at the national level. So the issue is whatever is happening at the national level, it has impact at the local level, including ratings and including the debt ceilings that have been set up. So this means that we now need to have new conversations. We now need to look at what are the other alternative sources of financing development. More alternative, but also more complementary to the existing financial ecosystem. So with that, I will move to my presentation, my slide. Somebody help me to the next one. Next slide. Nope. Next slide. That slide. But I can't see it from here. So I can see it here. And before I do that, let me introduce our distinguished panelists who are here with us today. I'll start with Mr. Lawrence Mafuru, who is an Executive Secretary of the Planning Commission, President's Office in Tanzania. He is a former Deputy Permanent Secretary, Minister of Finance, just a month ago. Mr. Sergio Sudolski, I apologize if I butcher your name. He is online. He's the Executive Vice President, Vieira Investments, Sao Paulo, Brazil. We have Mr. Gaetan Gochat, Director of Capital Markets at Global Sovereign Advisory. We have Ms. Marisol Blaques, Senior Analyst at Moody's, based in Spain. We have Mr. Yves Miladet. He's the President, Agence France Locale. He's here with us. And so with that introduction, we'll go straight into my presentation, basically setting up the context of our conversations today. So this is what we call a UNCDF approach for domestic resource mobilization for cities and subnationals. It starts on the left side where you have national and development and global development agenda. In the countries that we operate, there's always a 5-year development plan. That 5-year development plan has a budget attached to it. So if you look at it, maybe around 40% of that budget is supposed to come from either private sector or other mobilization that needs to happen. So that 40% is a big chunk in any of these development 5-year development plans. That means it's an opportunity for cities, subnational entities, state-owned enterprises to be able to tap into capital markets as one source for that financing. Now, so everything is driven by planning, is driven by the domestic agendas and also international agendas, including the Paris Agreement, the Addis Ababa Action Agenda, the recent Doha program action. So number 2, the approach that we have been proposing and we have been in many countries and we have been implementing recently is all about working with the ecosystem of domestic capital markets. And this is about using a portfolio of income generation infrastructure project to access finance. Now, I'm saying this as an alternative because you already have the traditional ways of raising capital to be able to finance development and finance cities. So the value proposition here and what is important in terms of these conversations, because we are talking to ministers of finances, we are talking to ministers of local government, we are talking to central banks, we are talking to regulators. I think the conversation here is about risk mitigation, is about don't look for sovereign guarantee, okay? It's about our debt is already, we landed in one country in the same week, IMF had listed the country, assessed the country as in a debt distress status. So you could not have any conversation with anybody about any instrument that involves debts. It's about local currency, because at a local level, your infrastructure for public services is long-term. So you need long-term, is long-term, but also you need to match that with long-term finance in local currency, because your revenues will be coming in local currency. So it's a way of it's a way of tapping into domestic capital markets to finance development. Now, on the blue circle, what we have been advocating in this conversation is these innovative instruments, we call them. We are saying, instead of doing a general obligation bond, whereby a city using its balance sheet and the strength of its balance sheet and its governance structure, which in many least developed countries and emerging markets, the balance sheets are not that strong, right? So instead of that, use a revenue bond or a project bond approach. Cities will tell you, we're not allowed to borrow more than 20% of our own source revenue, which is already small. So, but you ask them, are you allowed to set up an SPV? They said yes. The SPV can go to the capital markets. When you go to the capital markets, the regulator will say, you know, you can, as a city, using SPV, you can ride on the existing framework of the corporate bonds, because corporates, like banks, can raise money, right, in the stock exchange. So a city can do exactly the same and raise the same money, because otherwise the bank will raise money and then will own land to the cities. But the city can access the same pot of money. What you need to do is to put together an appropriate governance structures which will be acceptable to investors. In this way, you have what we call the SPVs. You need to have guarantee facilities from AAA rated or A rated institutions. If you don't have a guarantee, then you have to have city rating. Now, sometimes city rating, you may have city rating, but it will be lower. If it is low, then why don't you use a third-party guarantee as a risk mitigation option? So that's the conversations that we are talking. So I've covered the blue circle and the orange circle in terms of risk mitigation. I wanted to go into a case study, which is a transaction that we have done using this approach. But in the interest of time, because I have one of the panelists online who is leaving in 12 minutes, I'll go into that case study after he speaks. So with that, I would like to invite Mr. Sergio, who is Executive Vice President of VR Investments in Brazil. Over to you, Sergio, for your intervention. And for that, I think I wanted you to concentrate specifically on the intermediation role of development banks to drive capital to the local government. So the intermediation of development banks to drive capital to the local authorities from your experience. Over to you, Sergio.
Thank you, Peter. Hello, everybody. It's a great pleasure to join you from a distance. Unfortunately, I'm not in beautiful Malaga today. but certainly a great pleasure to join you today. Thank you, UNCDF, for the invitation, FMDV, and all the partners involved in this wonderful event. So, Peter, over to your question. I've worked in several development banks, multilateral, national, and subnational, and I think relating to your question, we are in a moment in time where we need to mobilize capital at scale, right? Perhaps a few large cities in a country will be able to get involved in more sophisticated transactions, maybe the capital cities, or maybe city number 2 or 3 in a smaller country. In a larger country, maybe 15 or 20 cities may be able to structure an SPV or any kind of a more sophisticated structure. But let's take into consideration a larger number of cities. Let's take into consideration Brazil, that has more than 5,000 municipalities. I doubt that more than 20 of them could structure by themselves, or even with the help of a bank, be it an investment bank or a development bank, a very sophisticated project. Therefore, if we want to mobilize the capital markets, we need to have intermediates. And I believe that having more than 500 development banks or development finance institutions all around the world in a very strong network that can collaborate with the Association of Municipalities, the different ones, in sharing experiences, especially relevant experiences, successful experiences in difficult places, in emerging countries of different sizes and geographies, can be something very powerful if we want to achieve the SDGs by 2030, if we want to really implement the Paris Agreement and the Addis Ababa Action Agenda regarding the development finance. So that said, I believe that subnational development banks and national development banks are very close to the terrain, and they can be very powerful partners in terms of providing on-lending programs and also doing the hedging contracts if this is done in hard currencies that come from other international markets with longer tenures, right? I mean, this is very relevant when we're talking about local infrastructure to have long duration of financing, many times financing that will last more than a single mayor's mandate. So we're talking about 10, 12, 15, 20, 25 years to finance some of the critical infrastructures for a local project. So at the same time, I do think we need to strengthen and deepen the local capital markets, and the experience here in Brazil has been fantastic. Nevertheless, we don't still have the representation of the Brazilian economy at its full potential in our own capital markets, which are the most developed in Latin America. We do have the constraints if we look at the situation of the federal government, the local government, the state-owned government, of the limits to indebtedness. And therefore, a debate over sovereign guaranteed loans and non-sovereign is important. And then the intermediates can play a very significant role. The reason is many of these entities, which are aligned with the multilateral development banks and the international agreements, they have a similar mandate, they share the same DNA. they can be relevant partners in doing non-sovereign operations. And then they can on land to a very large number of cities in programs that can be pre-established. Even they could be for smaller cities, be designed at scale for mitigation, for sanitation, for smart cities, for all kinds of renewable projects. So you could have kind of predefined, already designed fit projects that can be embedded in digital platforms, which is what we have created during our tenure as CEO of the Development Bank of Minas Gerais, and then on land to a very large number of municipalities. In our case, we were on landing to more than 400 municipalities at the same time, and with 4 different programs tackling renewable energy, sanitation, water systems, and others, and using resources from multilateral development banks and also resources from SDG bonds that we had issued both in the domestic markets and elsewhere. And we would not overburden small municipalities and their teams that are not trained, not sophisticated in capital markets, but we would provide them with local currency. So we would take all the hedging costs and all the cost associated with internalizing those resources, and already provide them with a specific use of proceed that meets their needs. So I believe that we already have successful experiences in using digital platforms where all the documents from a municipality can be submitted, and therefore you can avoid all kinds of corruption schemes and intermediaries.
Can you
And
hear
on
me?
the yes, just finalizing.
Okay.
And on the other side, using and tapping into the sophisticated capital markets, using the teams, the staff of the national development banks or subnational development banks. So thank you for your attention today and just providing some concrete examples.
Well, thank you very much. I wanted to tell you that I didn't tell you in advance, so my apologies. I had given you about 7 minutes, and I was willing to extend the 2 more minutes. But thank you for your intervention, and I think you will not probably be here when we are doing follow-up questions. But thank you so much for your time. So. Now, maybe let me go back to the presentation, and I wanted to present the case study of the transaction that we are doing right now. Next slide. So this is the case study of a subnational bond. Next slide, please. It is Tanga Water Infrastructure Green Revenue Bond. So this is a water infrastructure project at a subnational level, number 1. It has been already certified and approved as a green bond, okay? It also has already been, it's been structured as a revenue bond or as a project bond. Next slide, please. So this transaction is important because it's a pathfinder transaction. It's a historic transaction in the capital markets of Tanzania. It is going to be the first bond to be issued by a water authority. It is going to be the first revenue bond in the Dar es Salaam Stock Exchange. It was supposed to be the first green bond ever in Tanzania, but now will be number 2 because a bank has just issued the first green bond just last month. But still we are ranking ourselves number 2. It is going to be the first bond specifically raised for specific infrastructure project at a local level. So for us, it's a template for replication. It's a template for scale up. And this is exactly the same template that cities and municipalities can use. Next slide, please. So this is the transaction. It is a $23 million in local currency. It is a 10 years bond. The coupon will be paid semi-annually. It will be issued in the Dar es Salaam Stock Exchange. It has very important elements in terms of enabling environment. It has been excluded from withholding tax. And the use of proceeds will be going to build water infrastructure, so new infrastructure and rehabilitation of old infrastructure, and putting smart meters, and basically, and also conservation of the water sources of the project. So this is a transaction that is now sitting with the regulator in the Capital Markets and Securities Authority, the regulator in Tanzania, for review and approval, and hopefully we'll conclude it in November or in December. Next. So the issue, this is the governance structure, or basically the bond structure, and the reason I decided to show it is because it shows the risk mitigation strategies that we have used in terms of ring fencing revenue, ring fencing project investment, and ring fencing collection of the money, and how you are able to pay interest and you're able to pay over 10 years. So that is the structure. I won't go into the detail of it. Next slide, please. All right. So the reason I brought this up is because I talked about the approach that we are using, and we have a pilot transaction, and there are many transactions that are coming replicating this same approach. So what I wanted to do is to bring in a panelist, Mr. Yves from Agence France Locale, to provide the experiences of financing local governments through capital markets as well. Over to you, Yves.
Thank you all partners for the invitation here in Malaga. So I try to be very pragmatic, as a banker should be.
I'm giving you 7 minutes, and
Yes,
if you are late, so you can add 2.
No worry, my taxi is in 30 minutes. So I try to be very pragmatic and describe you the reasons why French local governments have decided to create more than a SPV, but a bank. So what were the French characteristics of the market? First, in France, approximately 70% of the investment is bared by local governments, which means that to finance transitions, if you don't have the proper system to fund local governments, you're just out of what you should do. France is not a federal country. It's a country where we have a very large number of local governments, almost 40,000, which is more than the rest of Europe. So we had to find something that was that made eligible local governments to go to capital markets, which obviously is almost impossible for most of them. Approximately 20 are doing something every year, and most of the time for very limited amounts. So they are not targeted for what asks capital market specialists and particularly investors. France is a country where you need to be very a hard seller if you want to convince the government to give some capacity of acting to local governments, probably like in a lot of countries. So this creation was made almost against the state. At least we needed years and years to convince the state that what we wanted to do was something logical. Why did we do that? You remember the financial crisis? France is what we call a banked country. Crédit Agricole, BNP Paribas, SocGen, BPC, we have banks everywhere, huge ones. They are all involved directly or indirectly in funding local governments, and here I'm talking exclusively of budget funding, not project funding, which make a difference with a lot of what we heard today. And we also have public banks. But what happened in 2007 was a huge crisis with huge effects for local governments, not able to access to funding, not because of them, but because of the banking sector. And when they accessed to liquidity, that was with very high pricings because of the Dexia crisis. So AFL is an institution that has been created by local governments, and they said, are there some countries in the world that did better than us? And we found the Nordic European countries, Sweden, Denmark, Finland, Norway. We found the Netherlands, we found Japan, and we also found an institution that is now 50-year-old in British Columbia, Canada, all belonging to local governments or to state and local governments. And all those entities, the oldest one is from 1899. They all crossed the financial crisis of the 20th century, and they are still here. Most of them have market share from 50% to 100% to local governments. And most of them have one business only: drawing money from capital markets, managing this money, and then lending the money to their shareholders. So basically, we copied those systems and we adapted those systems under French public law. And we now have, we now are 10-year-old. The balance sheet is almost 10 billion euros. We lent last year 1.4 billion to French local governments, and we are ranked at the moment as the 4th lender in the country for a market that is 20 billion per year. And I have no doubt that a day or another will be 3rd and 2nd and 1st, just because of the other examples in the world that are really doing very well. So maybe last one word about transitions, because it is the key of what all of us have to do and to think about today. We now have 1 billion outstanding bonds issued on the sustainable market. And we've set up an organization where we go and read automatically the investments of local governments, and we have created a framework that enables us to go to the sustainable market without asking anything to local governments. We do the work by ourselves, and we have automated this screening from investments of local governments, enabling us to go to meet investor demand on that front. We are 36 people at AFL, and you can imagine that we don't have time to enter into details to organize this reporting. So this is doable, and now we borrow 2 billion per year from international capital markets that are fully used to the local government lending. So I see the time coming. I don't want to be longer. Maybe one conclusion about this example. I think we have to help local government to be part of the solution. There is one sentence that is very important for us, which is, and you all know this one, give a man a fish and you feed him for the day, teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. We say, give a local government a nice subsidized loan and you fund it for a day. Teach a local government to access the capital markets and you fund it for the lifetime. And that's really the spirit of what we are trying to do in France, and then to expand, if we can be of help for anyone. It's always to see the final members, the final clients, the local governments participating directly to the systems.
Thank you very much. I think that is a concrete example of some of the innovations and some of the solutions for local government. So there are a number of solutions. Now, before you go, I will ask you a question about, this is happening in France. So will this happen in Benin? Will this happen in Vietnam? Will this happen? Is it possible for this structure to be replicated in emerging markets?
Well, once again, we copied the structure. We can be imperialist sometime, but this time we said, how the other ones are they doing?
Is this a new map?
And they do better because we were the worst example. The Dexia crisis cost 15 billion
Do you want
public
to
money.
tell everybody?
Okay, the worst example.
Hey, everybody, he's got the new map.
So, of course, it is replicable.
What are we seeing?
Common elements between Japan, Canada, the Nordics, France, and the Netherlands. We have integrated capital markets. Of course,
Do we get the destruction? That's what.
Developed capital markets to do it at a size of that kind. If it is for 30 million euro one time, it's different.
What are those red things?
If you want to be part of the system and lead the system, you need an access
Right
to
in the stadium, there was a big red, right?
That's why being part
Oh,
of
who
the
has Google Translate?
reflection about the system for the African continent, with so many currencies, so many jurisdictions, we don't see it feasible of the same way, except if you have the African Development Bank part of it. But what we would favor is a direct participation of local governments from Africa with the African Development Bank, because the bank already has the access to capital markets, and I don't think it's feasible as we did at the level of a continent with so many differences between countries.
Thank you very much. Once again, thank you, Yves. So we have heard these concrete examples of different solutions. Now, so let me go back to Mr. Lawrence Mafuru. Since you are part of the central government, I'm thinking, you know, this is possible. Why are governments not adopting this? So your insights in terms of more of a solution rather than the problems. I think if we start talking about the issues here, we'll be here all day, right? So more of insights of how at a central government you can create an enabling environment for cities to tap finance. So over to you for your insights.
Well, thank you, Peter, and also thank you, UNCDF, for inviting me in this very important policy dialogue. It looks like this panel is for pragmatism. You finish, you go. So I'll also try and be pragmatic in terms of my contribution towards this.
You have 12 minutes.
Okay, so let's assume that it is not about Tanzania, and let's talk about the global macroeconomic situation at the moment. And I'll try and outline a few points just so that we are really reasoning together as to why this is a timely conversation to have for developing economies or countries. One, Tanzania, like any other developing economy, is currently facing significant external shocks. Talk about COVID-19, the Ukraine-Russia war, monetary responses which are currently taking place in some of these major developing economies in fighting against inflation, resulting into rising prices in both the Western and the Americas. And then think about the uncertainties around China's growth and the US. China geopolitical tensions introducing a lot of uncertainties in the global economy, especially so because of the over-reliance of most of the African countries, Tanzania included, in terms of resources, whether it is financial resources or materials or even consumer goods. And then the other thing is the major shifts in what I would call re-globalization, and mark the word re-globalization, technological revolution, the conversation around the fourth industrial revolution, digital transformation, and the major agenda on climate change, where every lender, every financier, every donor, before they put money in front of you, you have to check the boxes of climate adaptations and your policies around that. And then looking at governments like Tanzania, which has a growing developmental needs, a growing developmental demand. The Tanzanian economy is growing at, over the last 2 or 3 years, have been growing at 4.5%. The Tanzanian population grows at 3.2% year on year. So that kind of growth will not dent poverty. And so if you are to address your development challenges, you will definitely end up with increased debt for financing your development challenges, and therefore your policy trade-offs in terms of debt management and economic growth becomes a big challenge. So put all that together, it does create some sense of urgency for a government to mobilize critical resources through alternative financing. And this is why I think I'll start my conversation by telling you and SDF that the work that you started in Tanzania and perhaps in other developing countries will start to pay dividends, because the timing is now, given the fact that the alternative financing resources are going to be critical, given what I have said. And so quickly zeroing into Tanzania, Tanzania is obviously a developing country, one that is really looking at alternative financing sources as a means through which we will strive to realize our development agenda, simply because borrowing from the conversation in the previous discussion, which was Dr. Mystery was moderating here and talking about the social contract between the people and the local government authorities. If you think about it, the social contract between people and local government authorities, by extension, is a contract between the central government and the people as well. The development agenda that is implemented by the LGAs is done so on behalf of the central government. So using municipal bonds or subnational bonds as a financing option is not, again, as we heard this morning, financing the municipalities and the subnational agencies. It's indeed financing the agenda, the development agenda of the country. So getting people to understand and realizing that using alternative finance, especially municipal bonds and subnational bonds, is not directing money to those institutions, but it's really using them to deliver the development agenda for the country. And I think that's the first realization that we have seen in Tanzania. And this is fundamental, I think, for every government in terms of looking at policy changes that will result into mainstreaming alternative financing into our main fiscal list. I think what is working for us now is appreciating that despite the fact that 60% of our budget will be implemented through our domestic revenues, and the remaining 40 will be using other means, which is loans from, concession loans, commercial loans, donor financing. But even the 60% is not coming as it is at 100% because of the shortcomings that happens in the economy. So sometimes you end up achieving your revenue collections by 80, 90%. So you'll always have about 10 to 20% gap in terms of your domestic resources. Now, if you are to dent poverty and deliver on your agenda, definitely that becomes a big challenge, and therefore you are forced to think about other means and ways of delivering that. Tanzania is currently delivering its Vision 2025, which is on the last 3 years, and it's done through short periods, medium-term periods of 5 years. We're currently doing the last 5-year development program, which requires a funding of about 114 trillion shillings. This is about just over $45 billion over the last 5 years. Like I said earlier, you would have wished that you can fund this from your domestic resources and a portion from the traditional financing options. But even those two are currently not coming to the party, as I said earlier, due to the many externalities that are surrounding the financial world. So this calls for an appreciation of how can we really tap into this new way. And that's why I said earlier that it has become easier to adopt this, and perhaps our biggest challenge has been to deal with the deep-seated culture or behavior or belief that development financing is for Treasury and the Ministry of Finance. And so to deal with that, I think that's the work we've started doing over the last 2 years with UNCDF, trying to, one, creating capacity, education, and exposing our colleagues in the government to see to it that indeed alternative financing through these subnational options and municipalities could become as an alternative. That helps us to one, address our growth challenges. Like I said earlier, if you're to continue with certain pace, or the same pace that you're seeing on the growth, where our growth is not good enough or faster enough to dent poverty, then we end up with poverty levels that are not being addressed, because despite the growth, but you're not doing everything that you want. So the challenge is exacerbated by that conundrum, that your economy growth and population growth are not in tandem. So key policy directions or policy undertakings that we have adopted over the last couple of years, and that seems to put us in the right space in adopting these options, is that one, we developed a financial sector master plan, and within that master plan, we clearly pointed out that we will have to push through the alternative policy agenda, alternative financing policy agenda, as one of the milestones that must be measured and monitored in making sure that they become one of the mainstream options within the fiscal envelope that the government uses. So that's the first step, and then this was done under the auspices of a regulatory, capital markets regulatory authority, cognizant of the fact that most of these financing alternatives, such as bonds and other instruments, may be funded through international capital markets, we fast-tracked the sovereign rating. Tanzania is now fully rated thanks to Moody's and Fitch, who are the official sovereign raters of Tanzania. So today, we can access international markets if the market conditions do support, which means then all these green bonds, blue bonds, and all the international instruments that are available in the market can be accessed as long as we are able to put together appropriate instruments. And the Tanga Uwasa transaction you referred to is poised to be a beneficiary of this development on the sovereign rating. Very quickly, appreciating that we need to manage time, we've done some regulatory reforms that also were acting as stumbling blocks every time conversations around alternative financing came up. These public-private partnership had some weaknesses in there, and we've done some revision in that act, which will allow a smooth operation of some of these instruments. The Government Loans, Guarantees, and Grant Act, which was also limiting the municipals and subnationals to access capital markets. There are now provisions, and the process has been laid out on how these can access markets. The Banking and Financial Act as well been revised to accommodate some of these, because they were really standing as stumbling blocks every time there were attempts to access this market. And of course, the other one is the Public Procurement Act, has also been revised to accommodate this. So I think for me, Peter, what has worked and what will work for governments and even for Tanzania is to be able to create, or rather to create an environment that will support the growth of these instruments. And we are very excited about the Tanga Uwasa, because we think that with that coming into the market, we will have a template that will now roll out into other agencies or municipalities. We are already making Tanga Water Urban Authority a center of excellence for other agencies to start learning on how they've been able to deliver. So let me start here, and maybe just before I go, stop here, before I go, just to put a few caveats that whilst we shouldn't really be regarding these as panacea to our development problems, because not many or not all the municipalities have access to the same economic fortunes. You will have very strong, well-established municipalities within localities that supports economic activities that can generate revenues, whilst others will not have that opportunity. So they still need some kind of work to be done by the central government to support those local municipalities that are on the periphery and they don't have equal economic fortunes that others may have. But I think the other one important aspect is the political will. And every time we talk about political willingness, we hit around the bush, but we usually talk about the top leadership, the president of the country. We've had an excellent opportunity to have a sitting president at the moment, who's pushing for private sector participation in driving the economic agenda, and therefore has been guiding the way and clearing all the blockages to facilitate these movements. So I think we would like to quickly tap and use this window of opportunity that have come through to create foundations that will help us build into these new ways of financing development agenda. Peter, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mafuru. I wanted to have a follow-up question, but I think you have tapped into it towards the end. So this is about tone at the top. So if we are struggling on our own at different level without integrating efforts nationwide, it will take a long time to achieve this. So in the case of Tanzania, the tone at the top was really important because we had a meeting with the president. Mr. David Jackson was there. The president told the Minister of Finance that let's go do this. I'm giving you directions that we should do this. Now, all of a sudden, the road is clear. Now we have a runway of about 2 years of this political buy-in. And you look at, when you go to, usually the obstacles are always at the central bank or Ministry of Finance, your biggest obstacle. But now, they are the ones, when we go to meetings, to ministry, to local governments, they are coming with us into this meeting. So one thing that worked is we established what is called a national municipal bond task force. Central bank is in it, Minister of Finance is in it, Minister of Local Government is in it, Stock Exchange and the regulator and UNCDF. So I'm not saying this is the way to do it, but what I'm saying is these are some of the models that are working. So we have two panelists, and thank you so much for your patience. And I would like to bring Ms. Marisol Blackes. She is a senior analyst, global sovereign and sub-sovereign at Moody's. And so Marisol, looking in the mirror, we have here conversations about the debt status at a sovereign level is limiting access to capital at the local level. So Moody's is doing ratings for cities, but is also doing ratings for sovereign government. So I wanted to see if you can link your planned intervention to that conversation. Marisol, you have 12 minutes.
So, thanks, Peter, and thanks to the organization for inviting Moody's. So I think that first we need to start with what's a rating and why a rating is important for regional local governments that want to access to the financial markets. So I will say that access to financial markets usually require to have a rating. We can distinguish between issuer ratings and debt ratings.
Excuse me, can you all hear Marisol?
No?
Okay, perfect. Maybe speak closer to the mic.
Okay, so I was saying that we can distinguish between issuer ratings and debt ratings. So long-term issuer ratings are opinions on the capacity of institutions to repay their financial obligations, or what we call the probability of default. When we have a long-term debt rating, the rating will indicate both the probability of default and the expected loss in a default situation. So investors are using ratings are used by investors when deciding where to place their money. So let's say that ratings help investors to understand the risk associated to a particular investment. Ratings can also facilitate comparisons and allow investors to easily compare risk between different investments and issuers. A high rating usually indicates a lower risk, which make the investment more attractive for the investor. On the other hand, a low rating indicates a higher risk. So ratings are also essential for entities looking for funding in the financial markets. Here, the investors, for many companies and governments, having a rating is essential to access to the financial markets because investors often require to have a minimal level of rating. So, in addition, ratings are also important for entities that look for money in the financial markets, and generally speaking, a higher rating usually, an entity with a high rating usually get better financial conditions than an issuer with a lower rating, because the lender sees less risk in that operation. So in summary, ratings are an essential tool in the financial markets for assessing risk, helping investors and lenders to take decisions. However, it's important to take into consideration that ratings are only a tool and are not the only element to take into consideration for investment decisions. So in our rating universe, well, we use the same methodology for regional and local governments around the world. So under this methodology, we rate around 350 entities. So the ratings for regional and local governments are the combination of two factors. First, the baseline credit assessment or the individual credit profile of the issuer. This is what we call the idiosyncratic risk. And second, the probability of default, of extraordinary support from a higher tier government in a default situation. So here we use the systemic risk. So to assess the idiosyncratic risk, we use a variety of factors, including the economic conditions, financial performance, institutional framework, debt profile, liquidity, and governance. Here we use both quantitative and qualitative factors. On the other hand, we also assess the operating environment where the regional and local government is located. So here we consider the general risk that apply to all regional and local governments in the same country, which is represented by the sovereign bond rating. This is because of the macroeconomic and financial linkages between the regional and local governments and the sovereign. And this is what we call the systemic risk. So regional and local governments usually benefit from the improvement on the sovereign's credit profile. For example, positive economic prospects for the country as a whole will probably be translated into higher tax revenue collection for the regional and local governments, and also higher amount and more predictable government transfers, with both taxes and transfers represent a significant portion of the operating revenue for regional and local governments. But the rating of the sovereign is also a limitation or a cap for the rating of the regional and local governments. So in a specific country. So because of their correlation with the sovereign credit risk, the regional and local governments are typically positioned below or at the same level of the rating of the sovereign. Even if a regional local government has a very strong credit profile, it is usually positioned below the sovereign rating. Cities, for example, usually do not have sufficient financial flexibility to support a rating above that of the sovereign. However, in our rating universe, we have some cases, some examples of regional and local governments with a rating above that of the sovereign, but they are very, very limited. Two conditions are necessary to have a rating above the sovereign. First, fiscal autonomy, and second, market insulation. So one example is the Basque Country in Spain and the autonomous provinces of Trento and Bolzano in Italy. So all these entities have a different institutional framework compared with their national peers, and all of them have a higher fiscal flexibility compared with other regional local governments in their respective countries. So, and also all of these entities have a very high level of cash on hand and very limited financing needs, which is translated in market insulation. So also something very important for us, as I mentioned before, is the extraordinary support. So regional and local governments usually benefit from the extraordinary support from the higher tier government, which usually is the central government. So using here we use the rating of the sovereign. So we have some cases of regional and local governments with a very weak credit profiles, but when applying the extraordinary support from the central government, their ratings have an uplift of several notches in some cases. So we usually assess the extraordinary support for each country and also for each jurisdiction. It could happen to have a different level of extraordinary support from cities than from provinces or regions. It depends on the responsibilities that they have, but it also will depend on a number of factors, such as the legal requirements or barriers, government policy stance, reputational risk, or the strategic role of the city or of the region in that specific country. So in summary, I will say that the rating of the sovereign is a key driver to assign the rating for regional and local governments.
Thank you very much, Marisol. So in the interest of time, I'll run very quickly and bring one of our distinguished panelists. So Mr. Getan is a director of capital markets at Global Sovereign Advisory. So listening to all the conversations today, and also your experience, maybe specifically I can mention of raising sovereign bonds in Francophone Africa, but also raising subnational bonds. So what are the lessons learned, and how do you link to this conversation? But also one more thing I wanted to mention, Mr. Gerton's firm is part of the consortium of lead transaction advisors, about 7 firms who are advising and structuring the Tanga bond. So maybe for half of a minute, you can also demystify the advisory work, especially working at a subnational level, and the critical role of it. Over to you.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you, UNCDF, for the invitation. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, I think, as you said, I'm a former banker. As you said, I've been working on giving governments, sub-governments access to international capital markets for over 15 years, and did a lot of work in Africa. And as part of the consortium we've been working on, and still working on actually, for the Tanga Wassa bond, I think it's a great example of innovation, as you mentioned, but also it's important to draw parallels between what works in the international debt capital markets that has allowed so many countries, especially in Africa, to access a market that, before the 2010s, basically was not necessarily accessible. The market conditions, Mr. Mafuru mentioned it, are not supportive at the moment, but this is an evolving market, and obviously things are changing and will change. I think I would say there are 2 key things. I think the preparedness of issuers and of the market, and also the whole creditworthiness, also linking back into the work that rating agencies such as Moody's do. I think what we've learned and what we're still looking at in terms of this development of the municipal finance, but I would say municipal, local authorities, and also local utilities. And I think it's a great example in the case of Tonga Awasa, because it's obviously, it delivers a public service, which is, access to water, clean water, drinkable water. It's also owned by the government. It has, of course, a client base that are corporates and everyday people, and yet it's an enterprise, so to speak. So it's a corporate that has a relatively autonomy that involved under the frameworks, on the water framework that is being designed by the government, yet has a strong financial standing. And I think for any municipality, any issuer at the subnational level, I think the replicability of this exercise that we've been doing, and also all the other work that UNCDF is doing around the world, I think it's finding that champion. And finding that champion not only as having it there and taking it to market, but also preparing him. And that comes the question about the advisor's role. I think the preparedness comes way before we announce, way before we get things done. I think it starts here. It starts in forums like this, but it also starts at the donor level. It starts at the government level. I'm very glad to have, of course, a senior government official at this table. I think it's very useful to have that perspective. It starts there where we are able, as practitioners, private sector participants, to bring the view of what the market is expecting. And what the market is expecting in the international debt capital markets has a lot of correlation with what they are expecting on the domestic market. In the domestic markets, whether you're a corporate, whether you're a municipality or not, usually in emerging markets, it's a shallow market, the lack of secondary, a lack of capacity for an investor to come in, exit the position, price it at the correct level, and therefore they don't come. Or they come on what is the vanilla products, such as FI bonds or some very big corporate bonds, or of course the government, the national government bonds, that they always have capacity to buy and sell, so that there is a secondary market. The question for municipalities is whether there is a secondary market sufficient so that they can access the market, but also whether the needs that they have, and every country is different, the need that they have can be met. If we're talking about a $23 million bond equivalent in Tanzania, it could be even less for a smaller utility. It could be even more for a way bigger market. The question is, how do you find critical mass? I mean, what if, from the Agence France Locale as well mentioning, is some of the French local collectivities who have to issue don't have sufficient base to find investors willing to buy 1, 2, 3 million euros. They need a benchmark size. And if you go to international capital markets and you're a sovereign issuer, you have to look for $500 million as a base. This is what will bring you index eligibility, liquidity of your bond. And therefore, I think this also means that the preparedness of the market has to come from bridging the gap of asymmetrical information. You need everybody to have access to information so that investors can come. Investors have to exit, but if you first want to be able for them to come in, they need to have information. You need to have, therefore, to publish financials. You need to have an auditor. You need to be transparent. You can have a rating that will allow you to have such publicity on what you as a municipality or as a local utility have. These are markets in the emerging markets where most of the issuances are done through private placements. So basically, you come to market, you have already found the investors because you went through more direct auction, and therefore the pricing discovery, the market diversity of all investors, whether they're foreign or domestic, is not accessed. And therefore, you need to find, I think you need to break these barriers as in preparing the market so that's all the investment that not only governments, but also, public bodies, institutions needs to put into developing domestic capital markets, like having guidance from the government saying, this is what I want this is my strategy for my domestic capital market. Finding these champions and nurturing them. So you have to either identify them and get them in a shape where they could be potentially ready to access, but you also have to take the ones that are there and make sure that these guys are the flagship and then they're able to attract capital investors that would not have otherwise come. The investor base, I mentioned it very quickly, and I think it's not necessarily the space here, but obviously, you have to tap into the retail, you have to tap into your pension funds, your social security funds, international investors, everybody who has that capacity to come in. Again, it comes down to market architecture. If you are a foreign investor who want to come into a domestic market, the entire infrastructure, custodians, being able to get out of the market, etc., is something that is putting a barrier to entry. So if you want to have municipalities, utilities that have access to their local currency market, then therefore you need to work on the country level or pluri-country level when you belong to a monetary union. For example, the West African Monetary Zone has that feature. You have to be able to bring down the barriers, and investors will not flood, but some of them may come over time, and this is a very long process. The second point I wanted to mention beyond preparedness of the market, the infrastructure, is also the debt sustainability, the capacity for these issuers to, as I said, to be coached in advance with a structure that fits. Peter, you showed the structure. It had been throughout the process of an evolving process to adapt to local investors' needs, to adapt to being efficient. There are many different structures. Not everything works for every single utility that has a defined source of revenue will always be an easier sell than a municipality that can be exposed to fluctuations into its fiscal base, etc. So the capacity building, all these are very important. You need to be able, as I said, transparency of information, both for investors to access, but also for issuers to know that there is money available, to know that there are funds like the Meridian Fund, to know that there is good-willing money that is available to be put to use, is also work that means connecting, being part of a forum, and making sure that it's not just inwards, it's also outwards, that these issuers need to be aware of and be more more involved. And that's also the responsibility of domestic capital markets.
2 minutes, Guy.
But also the central government. My closing point, actually, Peter, was to maybe bring a gap between what we've been doing into that transaction and also what the trend that we see evolving rapidly into international capital markets is the entire environmental, social, and governance type of issuances. So you hear a lot over the news: blue, social, green, ESG, sustainable, SDG bonds being issued by governments. This is a green bond because, of course, this has a green purpose. It's been certified and it's completely qualifies for that. I worked on the SDG framework for the Republic of Benin, for example, who issued an SDG bond back in 2021. We're working with other sovereigns who want to do the same. Some sovereigns have just issued frameworks without issuing bonds, just preparing the ground for future issuances. And that's why I want to say that maybe as a sovereign, as a central government, you need to keep the door open so that the local authorities have a say into what your framework will say. All the investors around the world, will have as part of their investment criteria ESG requirements, whether by law or by market practice. Therefore, if you want to have the developmental impact, which is at the local level, really being effective, you need to have local authorities to have a voice into that framework drafting. You need them to be consulted, and you need them to be empowered as actors of change. And therefore, the sovereign will write, publish, manage, monitor, report on its ESG framework will have to have, in my mind, a part of the discussion where local authorities either benefit directly from the money being raised, or where they actually give that capacity to issue to the domestic, to the local authorities. The frameworks don't do double counting. If you're an issuer and you have, like Tonga Uwasa, and if Tanzania tomorrow sets up its own framework, there will not be a double counting within the objective of the central government. It will exclude Tonga Uwasa's bond because it's a green bond, it's its own market capital access. What happens here is either you embed it and then therefore there's a dialogue and there's a flow of money, a ripple effect, or you give them the capacity to issue by giving them the independence and the structure. And that's where I think the advisory work starts at the very beginning and starts without the execution, so that these authorities are empowered, but are empowered to get through that finish line, while their central governments, keep on pushing and doing what they can from a development perspective at a much higher level.
Thank you. Guyton. So I think so one of the things that I caught is that the advisors come later, meaning that they come after the municipality or whoever the issuer is at the local level has prepared the transaction, and this can take maybe a year or 2 or 3, depending on the resources and the capacities that are available. So preparation is important before an advisor comes. So with that, I think let's go to the questions, a Q&A session. And I wanted to know, we're doing 15 minutes or 20 minutes? Amadou, Nan? How many minutes for questions? I heard 10. I heard 10. All right, so 10 to 15 minutes for Q&A. And let's start with questions here in this room, and then we can also grab 1 or 2 from online. The floor is open. Yes, please, Lars.
Hello, thank you. Lars Cronwell from the European Commission. Very interesting to hear about this innovative bond and bringing it forward. One question, you are focusing on one town, like Tanga. How does you ensure equality among the towns? Because in some way, one town will then assume a repayment obligation where the rest of the towns either get no investments or will actually maybe work with other financing schemes. So how does this work between the cities, and how to have a, what should we say, equal burden for or equal opportunities for the cities?
So I take it, I just want to make sure I understand the question. The question is the Tanga bond is based on repayment by one town, and I didn't understand the other part.
Whether that creates different incentives among the cities, that one town is with a loan where others maybe will benefit from grants. Does it create, what shall we say, a bit of a competition among the cities of not having the loan? How to create a proper incentives to move ahead with such a lending scheme?
Yes, please. So I think to start with, this Tanga bond, the repayment will come from the transaction itself. So it's a project-based, a very specific infrastructure projects. Its revenue will be ring-fenced first for operations, but also to cover the repayment of the bond over the 10 years. So we don't foresee any stress anywhere, because this is a bankable transaction in a true sense of it. This is a water utility which has very clear source of revenue. So this will not be a burden to the people, because it is not financed based on the balance sheet of it. So I answered one question, but I was supposed to, Jaffa Machano, please. I was supposed to take a couple of questions.
I have 2 questions and maybe a comment. To add on Lara's question, before the bond, the water utilities were getting subsidy from the government or not? I think that will be good to know. Is the loan substituting a different source of capital that used to be there? And then a question to the rating question about how the national rating supersedes the city's rating. But you say it in a very specific position. The city can have a better rating because you gave two conditions. And those conditions were not economic, right? It seems it's more political or legal condition, the ability to be totally independent and others. So what happens if a city has a really good economy? However, maybe it doesn't meet the other two conditions. Will it still be rated lower, even though financially and economically the citizens within the city have a much better participation?
Thank you. One more in the room.
Bonjour. Bon, je vais m'exprimer en français. Ousmane Sakou, directeur général des collectivités locales. Je vais m'exprimer en français. Je ne sais pas si vous avez...
Gaetan, if you can take the question, please.
Voilà. Ça va nous permettre de parler un peu français aussi. Effectivement, je sais que la question de financement des collectivités à travers des émissions d'emprunts et levée des capitaux, c'est vraiment une question fondamentale parce que les besoins de financement est là, existent. Je voulais maintenant, pour la plupart des pays africains, mais des communes guinéennes par exemple, ont la possibilité dans la loi d'emprunter aux banques, mais elles n'utilisent pas encore ces moyens. Bon, je m'adresse peut-être aux structures de classement des pays, des villes, mais aussi aux institutions de financement. Quels sont vraiment les préalables pour les collectivités locales, que ce soit les villes, les régions, de pouvoir constituer ou d'émettre des obligations et aussi d'avoir la facilité d'emprunter? Mais vraiment des questions simples comme ça. Et l'exemple de Tanga, je voulais savoir comment on va procéder au remboursement ou au paiement des obligations qui seront émises dans le cadre de levée de fonds pour le financement de ce projet Tanga ou de la ville de Tanga. Merci.
All right, excellent. So maybe we start with those questions.
Can I ask one more?
Professor Dimitri.
Thank you. Again, to continue the issue of ratings. In principle, it's good practice to rate larger projects, not just sovereign or sub-sovereigns, but also large projects. Of course, the economies of the project matter. I'm thinking, for example, about GAU train in Johannesburg. That's over $2 billion USD project. Makes sense. But in your practice, do you do SPV or project ratings? And what have been, if you do, then what are the examples?
All right. Thank you very much. So let's answer these questions first. We still have very good time. So the question from Mr. Machano, whether Tanga Water Authority was getting subsidy from government and is the bond substituting that subsidy from the government. So the answer is no. This is an autonomous entity in terms of governance and in terms of financial management. So it is not substituting subsidy from the central government. What they benefit from the central government is the Ministry of Water plans nationwide in terms of large infrastructure. So they can plan and they can maybe fund feasibility studies for infrastructure development for nationwide in terms of authority. But in terms of its own management, it is self-sustainable city, so it's not subsidized by the government. Now, maybe this question will go to Marisol because it's about rating. What happens when the city's rating is better than the national rating? That scenario.
Yes. So, well, what I understand is that what happens is if a city has a very good economic conditions, why this city cannot have a rating above that of the sovereign. That's why? Okay. So, okay, but it depends of the dependence of the city of transfers of revenues from the central government. So the examples that I gave before in Italy and in Spain, so these entities, they don't receive any transfers from the central government. They collect, in the example of Spain, that I know more, given that I'm Spanish, I live in Spain. So the Basque Country, they receive, they collect, they can levy all the taxes that you can imagine, all of them, VAT, special taxes, so all the taxes, they don't receive any transfers from the central government, and then that means that they are insulated in the sense that they don't depend on the central government. That's for cities is very difficult because the majority of them, the structure of the revenue that they have usually have a high portion of transfers from the central government. In some countries also they share some taxes with the central government, a small portion of PIT or VAT or property tax, it depends on each country. However, if they receive any transfer from the central government, that means that it depends on the central government. And if it depends on the central government, even if they have a very good economic conditions, so the rating should be capped by the sovereign rating. So this is on the first question. Maybe on the last one.
Yeah.
So under the sovereign group where I work, so we also rate GRIs, which are sorry, I can't see you because otherwise nobody can hear. So we also rate GRIs, which are the government-related issuers. So the government-related issuers usually are public companies owned by the regional and local governments and that provide public essential services. So under this, we use another additional methodology, which is the GRI methodology. So under this methodology, we rate some utilities, we rate universities, hospitals, and housing associations, which is a significant part of the portfolio that we have, which is very important in United Kingdom, for example, which is also extended to other countries. In France, they are growing very quickly as well. So, well, these are the examples that I can give you on other, well, different ratings related with the public entities and regional and local governments as well. So I don't know if I have responded your questions.
Yes? Okay. Thank you so much, Marisol. So the other question, over to you, guys.
Is there a French to English translation at all? So that everybody can benefit. I'm happy to answer to Mr. Sacco in French. Mr. Sacco, but I just want to make sure that everybody benefits from the translation.
Yeah,
Okay, from French to English? Perfect. Okay. In any case, I'm here for tomorrow as well if you have more questions. Monsieur Sacco, peut-être pour répondre à votre question, je pense que la question sur certaines municipalités, ou même sous autorités locales, ont le droit d'accéder au marché bancaire. Et là, c'était votre question. Et pourquoi elles ne le font pas? Je pense que c'est Et votre deuxième question, c'était quelles étaient les conditions préalables pour justement pouvoir prendre cet accès et le faire, avoir accès à ces différents financements. Et la troisième question, c'était justement quel est le modèle de remboursement de cette transaction dont on parlait en Tanzanie, qui justement peut être aussi un modèle, un exemple qui est important à suivre. Je pense que je n'ai pas les réponses complètes à tout ça dans le temps qui nous est imparti, et je serais ravi d'en discuter avec vous après. Je pense que tout simplement, en tant qu'ancien banquier moi-même en marché émergent, je pense que le point de base, c'est que dans un comité de crédit, pour donner accès en monnaie locale à des instruments de financement à des municipalités, la banque vous demandera toujours, un peu comme à titre personnel, une assignation des revenus. Et la difficulté de beaucoup de municipalités ou d'autorités locales dans des pays émergents, c'est aussi la capacité justement à avoir des ressources identifiées, certaines, et qu'on peut capter. Or, la captation de la ressource fiscale, c'est un gros problème de souveraineté aussi pour les autorités locales. Et par ailleurs, les autorités locales n'ont pas vocation à générer des profits d'une certaine manière. Donc, rembourser de la dette, c'est une chose. Pouvoir la rembourser de manière dans la fréquence qui lui est impartie, c'en est une autre. Et je pense que justement, une autorité locale, pour un banquier, va d'abord se dire, s'il y a un problème dans l'autorité locale, l'autorité va prendre l'argent et l'utiliser là où on a besoin le plus rapidement possible. Donc la probabilité de défaut est d'autant plus importante que sans capturer les flux en amont, c'est vraiment aussi priver la souveraineté locale de fonds dont ils peuvent avoir besoin si le gouvernement décide de ne pas y aller. Donc je pense que c'est plutôt en termes de comité de crédit local, je pense que les banques n'ont pas cette volonté de prendre une exposition sans aucun soutien. Donc on en revient à la question des organismes de rehaussement de crédit, de garantie, etc. Il y a des organismes qui peuvent être mobilisés, par exemple des organismes sous-régionaux, pour justement... La même question se pose pour les entreprises, les PME, les SMIs, etc. C'est exactement la même question. Comment on donne accès à des entités qui, techniquement, n'ont peut-être pas cette capacité de contrôler, de collecter l'impôt. Et je pense que la question se pose aussi pour des grandes capitales dans les pays émergents. Je pense que cette question, elle est tout aussi la question de la souveraineté, de la captation de la ressource fiscale au niveau des capitales. C'est aussi une question que souvent l'État refuse de donner ça et ne travaille que ce qu'on a parlé ce matin, les transferts fiscaux. À la question des conditions préalables, je pense que déjà c'est être au courant. Enfin, pour moi, il y a vraiment une question d'information, de mauvaise information. Savoir ce qui existe. Si on part du principe que justement les banques et les investisseurs n'ont pas envie de prêter, peut-être qu'ils peuvent, mais pas dans les proportions dont on a envie quand une autorité locale, dans un pays émergent, la question se pose aussi de savoir où est-ce qu'on va aller chercher les sources alternatives. Et souvent, la capacité à savoir que des sources alternatives existent, que ce soit via des partenaires du développement classiques, ou même avoir accès à ces partenaires de développement, qui peuvent être parfois juste au niveau du gouvernement central, c'est aussi une grande difficulté. Et je pense que les conditions préalables sont aussi la capacité d'information. J'ai parlé tout à l'heure des capacités financières, la solidité financière, c'en est une. La capacité de mobiliser une ressource, c'en est une autre. Et la troisième, c'est aussi savoir où aller chercher l'argent, tout simplement. Enfin, c'est simple, mais d'une certaine manière, c'est la plus compliquée, je pense. Le dernier point pour la question de comment le Tanga Wasa Bond se rembourse, Peter l'a dit tout à l'heure, je pense que c'est tout simplement un remboursement, c'est une société en fait. Et en fait, l'investissement, c'est une société qui vend de l'eau, et qui collecte des revenus sur les volumes d'eau vendus. Aujourd'hui, il y a un gros problème de déperdition d'eau et il y a aussi une énorme demande en eau. Donc à partir du moment où ils vont investir dans la capacité de production et de transport et de distribution d'eau, ils vont mécaniquement, on l'espère, augmenter les revenus. Et aussi, c'est aussi un organisme qui a un ratio de collecte assez très élevé. Donc ils sont capables de rembourser la dette tout simplement via les flux de leurs opérations. Il y a un mécanisme bien sûr de sûreté qui est mis en place assez léger, qui permet juste de mettre en place un fonds d'amortissement pour qu'on justement on puisse éviter la question que je mentionnais au début, le banquier qui se pose la question de savoir est-ce que pour rembourser, on met de l'argent de côté au fur et à mesure du temps qui passe. Sorry, that was a long question because the questions were very numerous. Happy to discuss further. Thank you.
So if you can you put in translation? So that question, why don't they do it if it is easy and it is possible? I think the bigger part of the question in terms of capacity and preparedness, I think Guyton has provided the answer, but I think there is the big question, the big elephant in the room is the political economy, political dynamics, the relationship between central government and the local government, and the mixed signals that are being sent. Sometimes things are not as clear as they should be. Many times you'll have a city that is prepared to put resources to prepare the documents that is required, and they are committed to do that. I have an example here. I don't know whether the director of the city of Kumasi is on the line. They want to do it. So they've done all of it, preparedness. They've solved the problem, what Guyton was talking about, right? But the issue is now the transaction has to go to the government to get preliminary approval for transaction to go. So they have to go to the Ministry of Finance, and they have to go to other places where they'll get a signal that they can do it. So that's where the complication sometimes happens, because they're not sure whether that will happen or will not happen. But I think with this ecosystem, with partners like ourselves, we have seen it in other countries as well. So we have been invited to work together to see, to go through that path, because I think it's not just a matter of Minister of Local Government, but it's also a matter of Minister of Finance, and also at the top, what the government is doing, what the central government or the political leadership is doing. Remember that back in the day, if you can research what happened to the Dakar bond, it's all the tone at the top. That's why it didn't happen. So we have run out of time. I would like to thank the panelists for your time. I know the two had committed. We ran out of time. They had to go. They had a prior commitments. But I also want to thank you, all of you, for listening, and have a good day.
Our last but not least session. So I would just like to request, that we stand up, no movement, but just stand up. We are going to make a call to one of the people that we love most. And where we are, there's no network. We try to look for the network to call. So let's just stand up for 1 minute, and then we will continue. So pick your phone. You're going to call someone you love. The network seems to be on the right-hand side. Can you try to look for that network? Look for it. Do you see the network? Oh, it seems it's now on the left-hand side. Please check. Oh, it's up. It's up. Oh, almost there. Okay, thank you. Please have a seat. Okay, so we are going into our last session. This is the first special session. It's on financing culture, inclusive and gender-responsive urban services and infrastructure. And I would like to invite the panelists to come and take your seats. Some of the panelists are online. Okay, so we have Honorable Ms. Rohi Malik, the Mayor of Banjul, is online. I hope. Okay, yeah. Welcome, our Mayor. And then we have David, who is the Interregional Advisor and SDG Cities Lead. UN Habitat is also online. We have Mr. Gordon Williams, who is the founder of Lalabella Alliance, is here with us. And then we have Tita. Tita is also online. Yeah. Tita is also online. And then, of course, we have our own Samina, who is the presenter for this session. So before we go into the presentation, let me just highlight a few things. First of all, we all recognize that towns, cities are urbanizing very fast, and the population is actually growing. Apparently, we note that 50% of the population, the world's population, is actually living in cities or major secondary towns. And this number is likely to grow. By 2050, it's expected to reach 70%. And you know what this brings to the cities? People come looking for services, they come looking for better life, but then they end up not having the services that they are looking for. They actually cause pressure on what is in the cities because they were not planned for that big population. So, and this also comes with the inequalities, you know, the gender inequalities, issues of social inclusion, and you find some people being pushed to the outskirts of the cities, and this, you know, resulting into slums. And then the women and children, you know, face it even more rough, as they cannot, in most cases, fend for themselves. So life is becoming a challenge, and so we need to address this question, look at how we can address the issues of gender inclusion, and also now the issue of culture and art in planning urban infrastructure. And how do we design, for example, the urban spaces to be responsive to the needs of the vulnerable people that live in those cities? And how do we make the cities actually green, resilient, and inclusive for everyone? So this is the question that we are going to address in this session. And so I would like to invite Mrs. Samina Anua, the Inclusive City Program Manager, to give us her presentation that will set the scene for this session. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. I have prepared some PowerPoint, but I think I'm just going to skip it because of the time, and I'll let our distinguished guests to have enough time. But I wanted to highlight, just to set the scene, as we were talking earlier as well, when we talk about development finance, and then how do we bring the intentionality of quality to the development finance by looking at the impact. So inclusivity, what it does is going into a little bit more in depth into what impact we want to look at when we talk about urbanization. So it looks at the quality of urbanization that is happening in cities. And I think, you know, as Jennifer also talked about some of the issues, but one of two major issues that we see which puts the premise for inclusivity is that not everyone is benefiting from rapid urbanization. Very important to note. And then financing as of now that we have is not moving to the places within the cities where the need is most. So slum areas, which are peripheries of the cities, where most of the poorest and marginalized communities live. So I think those are some of the main rationale behind us working on inclusivity. What it does is that it's helped us to design financing instruments precisely to address increasing marginalization and exclusion in cities. So not going into the details again, there are three main components of inclusivity. We are looking at the systemic factors. What is driving, increasing exclusion in the cities? So what is it that needs to be done in terms of the regulatory frameworks, in terms of systems change? We talked about it earlier as well. So we have a lens that lets us look at the inclusion from that perspective. So we have tools to look at the aspects of exclusion in cities. The second aspect is that investment in urban infrastructure and services is key. So it's not doing like water supply project or road or anything, but what is the inclusion lens that would be needed to be added to make sure that it actually benefits women and girls and excluded groups. So there's also a proper lens to look at all these different types of municipal investment that we talk about. So that's very important. And the third one, I think for a long-term perspective, is that how do we create local leadership? How do we make sure that there is a system in place for it to be like more like a natural process where we do interventions? So we emphasize a lot on leadership building. You will hear from some of the participants or speakers here, the female leadership is so important. Having female mayors, having more heads of departments who are responsible for decision making. So I think we are emphasizing a lot on this aspect. And then the accountability and transparency of the city budgets, how they are created, where the resources are flowing. So I think those different aspects we are very much looking at within our programs when we work with the municipalities. So those are three main areas within inclusivity that works. We've been working as pilot 3 municipalities for the last year. I want to give example of Bangladesh here, where we brought about $180,000 for a partnership with the municipality of Narel. So this is basically, we are working with mostly with the slum dwellers in this completely marginalized part of the city. And the request from the municipality was that can we do something about empowering these women who have been working on these handicrafts and made with environmental friendly products as well. So we worked on building a marketplace for them. The idea was that these are environmental friendly products, but how do we make an appeal for these products? What is it that needs to be done? Because the whole area everybody's working on that. But we wanted to make sure that there is a proper place for these women to take their business to another level. Not only that, we built an infrastructure, which anybody else could have done that as well. But what makes it special is that we attached a child care center. We made sure there's proper working conditions in place with sanitation, water, and then there's ownership of the stalls that are there. We also want to make sure that the women who are part of this infrastructure are benefiting for long term, so they're not being ripped off. And then the other important is that there's because of this infrastructure, there's a connectivity, local connectivity with the roads, electricity. So there's this whole ecosystem building is happening as well. And we see that as part of our other infrastructure that we promote through our work at CDF. Other than that, I think the systemic shift, you would say, okay, just one project, but like look at the systemic shift that we are bringing. So within working with this city, so for the first time, the city has started incorporating the needs of slum dwellers and marginalized communities as part of the annual plan and budgets. So that's one thing that's done. And then, as you know, in Bangladesh, all the land is owned by the national governments. So it's not centralized. So we worked with the national governments to enact a new policy that now allows cities to give land for very innovative projects like this one. So this was the first kind of precedent for it to take place, and then now there's a policy in place, and we helped to also formulate that particular policy. So not going into the details, I think what I would just want to emphasize going forward is that there are, for gender equality and women's economic empowerment, especially in cities, there are real issues. There are systemic problems. There's what requires structural transformation. What is needed is that we need a holistic approach, the one that we have. I think that's working. We are looking at as a pilot phase, and now we are going to be looking at scaling it up through our partnership with UN Habitat as part of Women-Led Cities. So looking at the systemic shift, changing mindsets, all of that softer part of the work that we need to do in the beginning, that forms the basis. So it's important to work in fewer regions, but the depth of the work is important. That's what we're learning. And then I think linking impact to development finance, what we did was when we defined impact for gender equality, it looks at all the different aspects, not just like economic development of that, but whether it's making it their quality of life better, are the workload increasing, is there more violence? So all these aspects are so important. So we're trying to look at this more holistic approach for investments. And then I think decision-making role, I mean, we can emphasize as much as we want because the leadership positions, female mayors, and then also like looking at female leadership at every part of it, different departments, as we said, having 5% female mayors is just not unacceptable. And I think our female mayor here would speak on that. And then the other trend and final point that I want to make is that we always tend to look at gender equality investments as something, okay, maybe you don't need larger investment. You can, so that's not the case. If you really want to make an impact and you really want to bring long-term changes in the lives of women and girls, you also need to look at exactly the same kind of investment you would do in other sectors, but with a gender lens, of course. So we need to look at scale-up investments in much bigger projects because that's exactly what the female mayors also need if we want to empower them. So I'll just stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Samina, for that presentation. I think it was very clear, highlighting the challenges that cities are facing and also the example that she has given of one of the countries where we are working. And she also provided some actions. In fact, when you're giving the example, I thought she was going to give the example of Uganda, where we have a city, Mbale city. It's one of the new cities in Uganda. And in this city, most women have been pushed to the slum areas. That's where they have some informal businesses. And they actually lack access to clean and safe water. It comes once in the taps and then it disappears. And we found out that the children actually go looking for water and they miss school. Even some of the teachers also go looking for water and they miss being in class to teach, and so it affects the performance of schools. But also very risky at night when there is no light. So one of the projects is actually providing that clean and safe water, having water reservoirs, and then, providing solar lighting at night so that they can even fetch water when it's dark. So thank you. So we will go to the panel, and we will start with the Honorable Mayor, Ms. Rohi Malik Lowe, the Mayor of Banjul, the Gambia. She's online. So over to you, Lady Mayor.
Thank you very much.
Maybe just to guide you on, the response, so that you fit within the 8 minutes that are provided. So I'll ask a question. What are the major obstacles for the female mayors getting into leadership in cities, and what actions are needed to increase opportunities and encourage women to take up leadership positions in politics?
Wow. Thank you so very much for inviting me in this very important conference with a topic very close to my heart. All protocols duly observed. I hope I am coming clear. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we hear you very loud and clear.
First of all, I wish to thank you for inviting me to share my experiences of being a female mayor, because it is full of obstacles. Yes, there are obstacles for female getting into leadership in cities, and even being a female mayor is quite challenging. Hopefully, we start getting more serious about gender equality, because it needs to happen. Women struggle to become leaders by being active in the political party despite their role in the family. Women do all it takes to raise funds for campaigns and win elections. We negotiate our way through despite the harassment and bullying. And after all, that we still face challenges ruling the city. This is not fair at all. The residents of my city do not know the title to use for me, a female mayor, because they have never had one before. And this brought in a debate in the city. Is she a mayor or mayoress? How do we address her? And this has called for a debate. Cities do not have adequate funding to meet up with their responsibilities. The sources of revenue are limited, and the most substantial source is the government transfer. The own source revenue is almost insignificant, as there is limited revenue coupled with tax evasion. This makes the revenue inadequate to fund any insignificant investment. One of the main reasons why cities can't raise revenue is the lack of sovereign guarantee. Most African governments have not authorized cities to enter into such arrangements, which makes it a challenge for cities to raise additional revenue for investment. I have realized that despite the fact that women are better city managers, and this is the reason why I was elected in the first place, the political environment is still unfriendly to women. The city of Banjul has existed for over 200 years, but no mayor has ever been re-elected except me, a woman. And mark you, previous mayors have been men, meaning only the woman was able to be re-elected. And I want to put emphasis on that for 200 years in the Gambia, man has never been re-elected as a mayor. This is the first time that this is happening in Banjul after 200 years. This is proof of the fact that the residents are happy with my work done by who? By a woman. One of the main obstacles I face is obtaining funding, even from development partners. I explained what happened some time ago. The main city market has never been renovated since it was built almost 200 years ago. 200 years ago, and it has never ever been renovated. During the raining season, traders bathe in the rain due to water pouring from worn out sinks. And who are these people? Women. During the dry season, they bask in the sun, and some even fall sick due to much heat, especially now with the increased heat caused by the changing climate. Who is suffering here? Again, women. The government tells me there is no money to renovate the market. The need for a modern market in the city of Banjul cannot be overemphasized. I decided to request for support from development partners to build the market, and I was waiting. By the time the funds were available, it was given to another city with a male mayor. All excuses why I couldn't receive the funding did not hold water. To me, my crime for not having the funding was just that I am a woman. Men prefer to support men, and they succeed because very few women are around the discussion table. There is no gainsay that women are better managers, especially in the city level, because they take the problems of the population at heart and solve them. They are non-partisan when it comes to providing services and advancing development. Women respect governance and financial management principles more than the men. We women often say, development has no particulars. I want to believe that it is for some of these reasons that gender equality is always top on the agenda in all policy formulation, though it is a challenge to implement and achieve it. Ladies and gentlemen, this is my second and last term in office. It is sad that by the time I leave, I am not quite sure we will have a female mayor again in the Gambia. The record I have broken is clear proof that the people need a woman to serve them. What then can we do to ensure that there is at least a female mayor, perhaps not only in the Gambia, but other countries that have just one female mayor or none at all? I have been asked to propose actions needed to increase opportunities and encourage women to take up leadership positions in politics. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish to start with the last part of the question by proposing actions that I think are needed to encourage women to take up leadership positions in politics. I suggest the designing of such programs to nurture young girls and women that are interested in politics. Interested young girls and women will be identified to participate at this program. The program can be designed at the UN University, and they will be taught how to handle all the challenges women go through to become leaders and how to raise funding for their political engagement and participation. For actions needed to increase opportunities, there is the need to advocate for a more inclusive legislative framework in every country, especially in Africa, to promote women's participation in politics. And I want to put emphasis on this again, especially in Africa, to promote women's participation in politics. The adoption of a quota system to ensure gender equality in politics may be a good idea. The UN can advocate for this to happen, as all countries have agreed to gender equality by adopting all international protocols, at least on paper, through several of the UN conventions that countries have adopted. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, women can never have a level playing ground with men in politics, and society turns a blind eye on all the discrimination women suffered, despite the good work done by women to advance care in cities. In West Africa, we have only 2 female mayors running the affairs of their capital cities. And I'm so afraid that in the next 4 years, if we don't come to their aid to help them come with developments in their cities and capacities in their institution, we will end up without female mayors in West Africa. And I think and hope from this conference, something will come out of it. I want to thank you all.
For those insights. The story that she has given, her experiences, it's really touching. Yeah, I don't want to make commitments here. Sometimes we get tempted to make pledges and commitments, but her situation, the experiences, the harassment that female leaders go through during campaigning. Once you get to office, then you need resources to implement your plan of action. And everyone is weighing you on a scale they have never used before. So it's really a challenging situation. But thank you for sharing your experiences. And we hope that such fora, give an opportunity, they give a platform for us to share what is happening, and hopefully the world will be a better place for all of us, the women, the children, and other vulnerable categories of people. She has given us some suggestions for the way forward, which I believe we can take as part of the action points. So let's now move to our next panelist. This is Mr. David Aubrey. He's online. He's the Interregional Advisor and SDG Cities Lead, UN Habitat. If you can hear me, I have a question for you. What challenges do cities and local governments, especially female mayors, face in providing inclusive infrastructure and basic services in cities? What lessons can you share from your work at UN Habitat to address some of these challenges? Over to you, David.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you very well.
Okay, great. So yeah, this is sometimes a difficult question to answer because the challenges are very different from one place to another. But I think quite often, particularly in developing and also emerging economies, we find that urbanization is happening very fast. And people are moving very quickly to cities. Cities are expanding quickly. And basically, the cities often lack the capacity to plan and finance the infrastructure needed at the pace that the city is actually growing. And so we find ourselves then in a bit of a vicious cycle, because a lot of cities are expanding in an unplanned way. And then when we try to bring infrastructure retroactively, it's much more costly and more complicated to retroactively bring infrastructure to an unplanned part of the city. So there's a real need for planning and finance, to look at planning and financing infrastructure together, and bringing in that sort of dimension of women mayors. I think we've heard a lot from the mayor, from Honourable Mayor of Banjul about the challenges faced by women leaders. But I think mayors and cities, whether they're led by male or led by women, find that planning is so often a function of men. If you look at universities throughout the world, a lot of the planning professors are men, and the thinking around planning is often a kind of masculine thinking around planning. And what we find is that consequently, a lot of the planning systems and that cities follow are quite male orientated, quite top down, and we're not really seeing as much as we'd like to of a kind of a feminine approach to planning, which would be much more collaborative, much more engaging. But I do believe that as cities work with communities in the planning process, in an engaging process, in a consultative process, in a more feminine process, that we will see the kind of the infrastructure that develops being much more responsive to an environment that allows women to thrive. An environment that has infrastructure that provides for safety, that provides for the basic services, that provides for improved equality. And so I believe there's a whole area of work that needs to be done on planning, but also on financing. We find that we have to look at financing and planning together. And so often, municipalities, as my colleague Lenny, who's with you, will attest, are only getting a very small proportion of the own source revenue that they could be collecting. And this is often down to capacity, and we are supporting that. We have, Lenny's just produced the own source revenue assessment tool that really helps cities to understand and diagnose how their revenue systems are working and what needs to improve. And then we find that cities are often developing projects that could attract capital, but they lack investment officers that can really package projects for investment. But I want to come back quickly to a more feminine approach to planning. And I want to introduce my colleague, Ellen, who runs a very successful Her Cities initiative in Habitat that really brings in a gendered perspective to planning. So let me give the floor to Ellen in the small time that we've got left. Over to you, Ellen.
Thank you very much. Just to mention that you have 4 minutes. Thank you.
I hope that Ellen is there.
Okay, I'm saying that you have 4 minutes.
Okay, so now you have some slides that Ellen has sent. Maybe you can just quickly put them up. Okay, so do we have the slides up? Okay, then we need you to unmute Ellen. So she can hear, she's part of this, but she needs to be unmuted, please.
Yes.
Okay, so
He has joined the meeting. David Aubrey has joined the meeting.
Here I am. Do you hear me?
Okay.
Yes.
Is it working now?
So I think, yeah, perfect. Okay, as my colleague said, and you're focusing on the challenges for female mayors. We also wanted to bring a little bit of potential solutions and ideas to bring forward into the discussion. Do you hear? Do you hear me?
Sorry, yes, sorry, over.
Okay. So you could just bring on the slides next, please.
The slides are up.
Yeah. Or can I share them myself? But we don't have much time. Yeah.
Just go ahead, Ellen, I think.
Yeah, we'll share it with you
We have the
later.
slides here.
Okay, you see them.
The host
Okay.
has spotlighted your video for everyone.
Great. Okay, so we wanted to share a little bit of an
The
example
host has spotlighted your video for everyone.
from Her City toolbox that we have developed with a range of partners, and we've been testing and piloting all over the world. So basically, what we're doing with the Her City toolbox is trying to plan a city for and with girls, and making sure that we create urban spaces that work for everyone. So it's really about creating the sustainable cities of tomorrow. So you just change the slides whenever you feel it's ready, because I don't see the screen. So the basic idea is really to support urban development from a girl's perspective. And what we do with this digital toolbox is to guide urban actors, both decision makers and professionals and other urban multi-stakeholders through this step-by-step methodology that we have developed. And it's available on an easy-to-use digital platform, free to use for everyone. And what we do as UN Habitat is really to try to facilitate this dialogue between professionals and citizens, and particularly the most vulnerable citizens. So we wanted to show you a little bit how it's done. If you take next one. We're following the three, next one, the one with the blocks. Yeah, exactly. So we're following the three phases of assessment, design, and implementation. You will walk through 9 blocks, starting with the stakeholder engagement. So it's really about gender, youth, socioeconomic, intersectional perspectives, and mainstreaming those into the urban development process. I won't go into the details here because we don't have time, but each step has specific activities, and we make use of the latest technology where we gather data. We use the Cobalt toolbox. We use Minecraft, the computer game, as you might have heard of, to co-design the spaces. And what we really stress, and I also heard a lady mayor mentioning it, how can we really share these results with the wider community, but also among cities? How can we put the good and best practices out there in various types of trainings? So that is also what we try to do at the end. And then obviously evaluating the initiatives and the development as it's finalized. Next slide, please. So oh, that's weird. Next. I don't know what's happening here. Next. Anyway, what I wanted to show you. Next, please. Yeah, next, please. I don't know what happened with the water here, but what I wanted to say, just share with you, is that we have users all over the world. 1,200 Her City users registered on the toolbox from 350 cities. We have 300 independent initiatives from 100 countries. And as UN Habitat, we're collaborating on 20 projects worldwide. And interesting for you to know, because we're in this specific setting, 25% of the users are actually from municipalities, but also 25% being from private sector and another quarter from civil society and academia. Next. Just very quickly, we've reached so far 7 million actually through various outreach activities. And we so far developed 10 different sites in these 20 cities, impacted at least 52,000 people that live in close connection to those spaces. And as you see in these other bubbles, we work a lot with capacity building, so trainings and different types of outreach activities to really support urban actors and people working in municipalities and other urban functions to be able to use these tools. Next. I'll just show you very quickly where these a few of these initiatives have taken place. So you see the users, the independent initiatives, and our partnership projects are as pink. Next. I'll show you a few images just before and after. This is in Beirut, in Lebanon, after the blast, a very important connection between two neighborhoods where we developed this space that you see at the bottom. So really a multifunctional space, being not only a passageway, but also a place for recreation and actually a playground for children. Next. We have this case in the Stockholm region, in one of the roughest actually neighborhoods in Stockholm called Botkyrka, where the space was totally taken over by gangs actually, and it was a very empty space where no one even wanted to go and do grocery shopping in the local mall. So, and you see at the bottom how the community and the municipality together managed to make this community space, and I mean it totally changed the entire neighborhood. Last image will bring you to Lima in Peru, where you see in one of the favelas an area touched by landslides, were totally reconstructed together with a variety of different actors into also community space that really became also a place where kind of the school activities can spill into and provide recreational and spaces also for the larger community, both for children and adults. So those are just a few images that I wanted to share with you to give you a little bit of a positive hint. And just the last slide, I think. And as you've seen, these are the proposals that come up most often. So girls plan a bit for themselves, but they plan for society as a whole. They plan for sidewalks, they plan for public transport, they plan for water and sanitation, waste management, etc. So you see, bringing their voices into the conversation really creates cities for all. And if you bring on the last slide, you will have a QR code, or not apparently, where you could discover the toolbox further. I'll put it in the chat if I can, so you could visit it and reconnect with us. Over to David.
Thanks, Ellen. I think we've probably run out of time, but just the point made about the different users, and we found that local authority is 25%, but what we really want to do now as a next step is to bring these forces together so that local authorities are working with private sector, are working with academia, working with civil society in a joined up way to develop that impact at the citywide level. So thanks very much, Ellen, and I hope people can see that tangible impacts that can be made for all of society when you engage women in that planning process. So thanks so much. Over.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate that intervention. I felt like it should just continue, continue looking at those beautiful places in the cities, you feel like living there. Yeah, thank you, and hope we can have more of that. They've highlighted the issue of, planning and financing gender responsive infrastructure. And we have seen some of the examples where they've applied the Her City Toolkit in action, and you could see that there are a number of changes. The urban spaces are looking safe, clean, they are breathing the fresh air, you could feel it in the slides. So thank you very much for those examples, and I hope that these can be shared so that we can maybe borrow a leaf and apply in other cities. So we are running out of time. We are moving to our next panelist, and this is Mr. Gordon Williams. He's the founder of Lalabella Alliance. I know this for music, for fashion show, for art. So over to you.
Good afternoon. I want to say hello to everybody, even though we're at the end of the day. I guess I'm closing the show, so let me try to finish up all right. My name is Gordon Williams. I'm professionally known as Commissioner Gordon on music. So since I was 17 years old, I've been in the entertainment industry. And I'm probably most known for artists like Lauryn Hill. I did Lauryn Hill's Miseducation. I worked with Quincy Jones. I've worked with Will Smith, 50 Cent, Joss Stone, Amy Winehouse, to name a few. I've won multiple Grammy Awards, a Tony Award. I've been inducted into the Library of Congress and worked for Sony and have been responsible for about 80 million record sales, maybe a little bit more, give or take. So that's my day job. But I had the opportunity of meeting, thank you. Listen, I'm happier to be here with you guys than you are to be with me. So let me tell you about how I met this guy, David Jackson. So I was speaking in Kenya about 2 years ago, maybe a little over 2 years ago, and at the after party, a friend of mine who's a senator brings me over to meet David, and he says, you know, there's this guy here, I think you need to talk to him. So I said, what does he do? And he says, you know, I think he works with the UN, I'm not really sure, but, you know, you just need to talk to him, he's really interesting. And that's all he said. So I go over to meet David, and we don't speak anything about anything political. We speak about jazz music. He starts to tell me about a saxophone player in Harlem who he really wants me to see. And that really intrigued me. I was like, that's a strange intro. I'm ready for the spiel and what's the business, and it wasn't that at all. And this struck up a friendship where David and I began to talk about some of the things that I was interested in, which was looking at ways that music can help. Really, it started with me, music helping young people. You know, in 2002, I visited South Africa. I was on a tour with some artists, and I was taken to a township to go see some young people there, and it broke my heart. The whole experience, being, aside from the great musical experience and entertainment experience I had there, the seeing the townships and the conditions and the way the young children were, it just made me feel like I needed to find a way to help. And I didn't really know how I was gonna do it. I just thought, okay, I have this position, I'm around entertainers, I do this all the time, maybe there's a way. And over the next 20 years, because now I looked at my calendar the other day and realized, like, wow, it's been since 2022, it's been 20 years that I've been on this road. I looked at ways to see how we first could help young people, but then as I met folks and up until meeting David, how that helping can also provide a service. Because one of the things that you learn in entertainment is if you can't make any money, it doesn't matter how good your song is, nobody wants to hear it. So you have to figure out ways. You know, the word we have to know is ROI. What's that? Where's the ROI? Where's the return on your investment? So I started to try to look at that and look at how we could teach young people, but also in teaching them, create ways that they could learn how to make an income for themselves. Because what we learn by default is how to become entrepreneurs, because you have to survive and you have to figure out a way to make things work. But these things become very lucrative, you know? And as I started doing more research over years now, I realized that, you know, all of this money that we create, it very rarely goes back to the artists or to the communities that the artists come from. So what if there were ways that we could do that? We could generate an income, we can put them, we can develop the young people, but we can also put them to work. Now, if that happens and they could make some money, well, what about if the community could make some money? What about, you know, if we made some money and we could build something, and the things that we build, they could manage it. And little by little, that actually turned into a program, which turned into a curriculum that I ended up writing, which ended up getting accredited, and I ended up teaching, and all these things happened while I was making music, but it didn't really come together until I met David. And, you know, part of being here is now we're in a relationship, my company and UNCDF, where we're looking at building recording studios, performing arts centers. You know, I'm involved in what's called the Orange Economy, and the Orange Economy is actually a thing. I didn't even know when I started this that there was even such a thing called the Orange Economy, which is music, film, fashion, art, and gastronomy. So I'm sort of the Orange Economy advisor with UNCDF. So we're looking at building these centers where we would teach the curriculum, build it, design it, build it, put the young people to work, but also look at developing infrastructure. And this started for me in Africa because what I learned in traveling all around in Africa and speaking is that the creative, unbelievable, the art, the amount of money that it generates. I mean, you have Nollywood in Nigeria, you have films going on, you have Afrobeat now all over the world, not just in the continent, but very little goes back into the continent because there's no infrastructure for numerous reasons, too much to even talk about now. I mean, currencies, the country differences, so many different things. But, you know, the lack of infrastructure creates the opportunity for us to create some infrastructure. And we have some interesting ways that we're looking at that involve all of you wonderful people here in this room, and including the mayor, who I have to tell Madam Mayor something that a friend of mine said to me. I want to close with that. A number of ways that we can work together to help not only empower the young people, I believe, but also create the infrastructure that would allow them not only to get paid, but also to allow government to receive revenues, and we can work that out. I mean, you guys are much smarter than me in dealing with policy, and I understand, you know, a little bit about the issues now that you work with, but I think there are a lot of ways that that we can connect those dots and not only do a good thing. I wrote down here, you know, culture, art is from the beginning of time, art has organized and framed a society and created what we call culture. That comes from actually art, and now we have a word for it. We have culture. So this culture that's in every society, you know, whatever society you're talking about, wherever it exists, this culture exists almost outside of this organized society. It's the voice, it's the thought that turns into the physical reality that describes what the culture is. So now, what if we took care of that? When I was just looking at the pictures that you put up of the communities, how they were transformed, the communities that were, you know, broken down, and you see flowers now, and you see balloons, and you see children playing, you see paintings on the wall. What that does for the community, aside from financially, is it brings everyone together. The community centered, brings us all together, brings us out of our separate places and brings us into our communal spaces where business happens in communal spaces. When we make music, we come together in the studio. We come together, we make a joyful noise, right? So we're gonna come together and make that noise. That doesn't happen. I mean, it kind of happens now because we got these things, good or bad, you know, but for the most part, we come together to do that. And I think when we lose the coming together, we lose part of that. And it seems like all of this is about that. So, you know, I know time is of the essence, and there's so much, as Bob Marley said, there's so much things to say, and, you know, there's never enough time. But I did want to say one thing. You know, I've gotten to know some very, very interesting people over the years who I've been able to call friends and mentors, and I'm so thankful to God that that has happened to me. But one that just left us this year was Mr. Harry Belafonte, and Mr. B was a mentor of mine, and he said to me, he said, Gordon, you know, with his voice, Gordon, you know, the only thing we gotta do is we gotta fix the women. So I said, what do you mean by, what do you mean that, Mr. B? What do you mean by that? He said, all the problems that women have is because of us. He said, but if we fix the women, we fix the world. He said, that's the only problem we have. And I sat there and I listened to him, and you know, it wasn't until I saw Madam Mayor, I saw her speak in New York, and I thought about what he said. I said, man, that man taught me all the way up to the end. So he said that. He said, if we fix the women, we fix the world. And that's my little 2 cents. Hopefully we'll have more time to talk, and I look forward to us continue working together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gordon, for that message. Again, I think it opens the way we think about development, the way we plan our cities. In most cases, when we are designing projects, we never think about culture, we never think about art, you know, where the theater is going to be, you know, where the art will be. We don't think about that. But this is bringing something new in our development design. I think it will be more exciting. And as you've mentioned, I see this actually helping to bring people together, reduce on the conflicts that we normally have, and have a peaceful community with easy structures to govern. And when people come together, then they think together, they plan together. It actually also contributes to good living, you know, good health. Absolutely. You have a nice social life, no stress. So I thank you very much. We hope to continue working with you and show some examples. And, you know, you've mentioned about UNCDF working with you. I hope we can have some pilots that we can demonstrate, you know, the peaceful, inclusive cities. So we have our last, the last panelist. This is Miss Tita Larasati, Chair of Bandung Creative Cities Forum and focal point of Bandung City of Design for UNESCO Creative Cities Network. Tita, over to you.
Thank you. Good late evening from South Asia now. I would like to share my slides so you can have a bit of picture about what I'm going to talk about. So this is only putting it in context about where I come from. So I'm happy to be here to be able to share my stories as well. So as mentioned, my name is Tita. Complete is Dunita Larasati. I'm teaching in a university, but I'm here also because I'm active in a lot of community activities. And to put in the context again, this is where I come from, a country with high diversity. And then we learn to live with each other, although we have 300 ethnic groups, 700 languages. But then the point is, most of young people realize that they have to stop relying on extracting economy or the economy that comes from digging minerals, cutting trees, and so on. And they start using human intelligence and creativity to make income because we see that the environmental condition is degrading and so on. And by that, so these young people, because they are the majority of the demography of the country, and also they are reflecting the demography at the local level or the city level. So usually these young people flock together and they do activities that become economic activities as well. And most often that they also provide solutions for their urban issues. And we do it repeatedly, so it becomes social innovation. So that's why then we connect with each other from different islands, different provinces. And now in Indonesia Creative Cities Network, there are already more than 240 city representatives that is doing this together with us within the context also of creative economy. Most people don't know where Bandung is, but then maybe this is also to put in context that Bandung was known to be the host of 1955 conference, the first ever that 29 countries in Asia and Africa gathered to decide what happens with their own nations. And the message from that conference, we have the 10-point of declaration. So the keywords of that conference live on until today, which are economy, culture, human rights, peace, and international partnership. So this is the building, it's still there now in Bandung, where the conference happened. And this spirit in the red boxes, we still carry today. And with that, this is Bandung today, and that's Bandung in West Java. Bandung is the capital city, and it is the most populated, the province is the most populated in Indonesia. There are 50 million people. And we still have a lot of heritage building from the colonial era. But the best thing about Bandung is that there are more than 100 universities and research centers. And among those many, at least 17 has the majority of has the major of design, architecture, art, culture, and so on. So imagine if young people coming from all over Indonesia and maybe abroad, they come to study and they will stay at least 3 to 4 years. And what do? So they usually find places to meet with each other, to exist, to be seen, and so on. So these young people are actually the ones who determine the dynamics of the city. So that's why if they see something wrong or maybe the place is not suitable for them, then they just make the changes themselves. So that's how Bandung Creative City Forum come about. So this group of young people, they don't wait for anyone. Of course, they connect, they talk to the government, but not everything is granted. And we have lots of difficulties in demanding that our public space should be safe, should be inclusive. Kampung or dense urban areas need to be taken interest as well, and so on and so on. So we did a lot of intervention to public space and to the dense kampung urban village area, and also to other issues like green open space, mobility, and so on. So we've been building prototypes of what can be solutions. And with the prototypes, the municipality, the government, the authority, and the policymakers, they can experience how it is if this is happening with their permission, with the budget that they allocate, and so on. And also not only them, but also the local people, they can also have a experiencing of how their environment can be more pleasant for themselves as well. So with those kind of intervention and activity, that's our main argument that get us into the network of UNESCO Creative Cities Network as a city of design, because we see design as a way of thinking to solve urban issues that manage to create values and meanings according to the actual needs and context. And we use creativity as a strategy to lessen the gap between people and government, people and policy, and among all stakeholders. And we've been using prototypes as well as a social innovation, experiments, and so on. And within the context of creative economy, this is a chart that we made for the then 2014 new period of Indonesia government. If there is a creative economy, we mean the ecosystem. So not only the transaction of creative products, but also the whole ecosystem that involves the human being, R&D, and so on. And if government want to take place or take part in supporting the sector, then we identify the boxes or the part where they can contribute. So we are holding on to this. We also, after those intervention and activity and urban intervention, we see the city also as an organic entity, like our body. So it has a center for thinking, it has lanes to distribute nutrition, it has memory, it has a garbage center, and so on. So what we did with the prototypes is like pinning a needle of creativity in the part of the body that ails. And if we do it consistently, we do it on the right pace, then the body hopefully will heal. So that's what we've been doing with our activity. And since we joined the UCCN, the UNESCO Cities Network, we also have a commitment to use our creativity and potential to answer to the SDG challenges. So we define the 10 principles of Indonesia Creative City that you can see there, some of the keywords, and then we put it also complying with the SDGs. For this session, because we have limited time, I was actually considering which to share with you, because we have a lot of cases. Bandung has been known as a city where you go for culinary experience, shopping, and hospitality. Bandung has Bandung has a lot of skillful production, especially in fashion, footwear, and everything. So we have a lot of industrial neighborhood. We also have a lot of informal economy sector, people working in there. And we also have, we do urban games because Bandung has a 70% demography of young people. So we have urban games to raise awareness among youth about their own habitat, about their own living place, because otherwise they just go to school and home, or at least school, cafe, and home. Actually, there are lots of things in the city that's more than just school and home and cafe and mall. So we try to get them involved to raise their empathy to that. So what I'm raising here is the urban games. We see the city as a living lab. As mentioned before, these young people are around us, and then if they are not directed to a positive direction, then the so-called demography bonus will be a demography disaster. So but then we cannot separate them from things that they like most, because they're mostly digital natives. And if we see that the influence of digital technology and so on, it can be negative, but it can be really also positive if we put in the right context. So we've done a lot of urban games, and this is like where they have to detect some urban issues and then report with the geotagging to a website that can be accessed by the teachers and then also by the city officials. So the city officials know what to dispatch to that certain problem. And they're doing it in a fun way, and it's competitive. They like to be competitive as teenagers. One that I can also show you is the game called Jalan Jajan, which means walking and snacking in the city, because that's actually what we do. So we give them a kind of book that they have to, it's kind of a riddle. Then
Sorry,
game.
Tita, I hope
Yeah.
you're about to wrap up.
Yeah, this is the last one. So through this game, we're introducing the city through its food culture and heritage, and also promoting local and historical culinary establishment, and enhancing particular exploration themes, because we have coffee trail, heritage sites, and so on. And we also promote small businesses because they have been existing for tens of years, but they don't have the means to promote their store and their products like the modern food chain, and so on. So this game helps them raise that. And this also supporting inclusive businesses. So this gimmick that you use in the game are produced and created by talented disabled people, young people. So they also have a job from this kind of activity. And in the end, we connected to the SDG that is connected to young people, city, and so on. And with this, I end my presentation with the point that we should actually enact whatever we have as a concept and so on with universities, with professional associations. And in the end, we managed to push this into a law. Whoever is leading the city should actually put attention to creativity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, I think you can see that there's just a lot to learn from. Several examples that have been given, and all of them, talking about inclusive infrastructure in cities, in municipalities, and very good pilot projects at community level. I like this one, city as a living lab. So meaning it's a lab. You're doing tests like you do in the medical lab. You test, you see that it's positive, it works, it's good, then you upscale or you roll out. So thank you very much, Tita, for sharing those examples. And colleagues, our session has eaten into the time by only 4 minutes. So we've kept our time. Yes, so we had arranged 10 minutes for Q&A, but since we have gone over by 4 minutes, then we have only 6 minutes for any questions, any comments. Only 6 minutes. Who wants to be the first one? Yes, Paloma.
Hello?
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Someone
Hello?
is trying to speak online.
We are having a Q&A, and someone in the audience is asking, then we'll hand over the mic to you. Paloma, please go ahead.
Okay. No, I just wanted to make a few comments to thank all the participants of the day, but of this session, because we're still in this session. And I wanted to quickly highlight that the UCLG Culture Commission has also been working, directly and trying to promote the role and place of culture in all our work around sustainable development. Well, we have not let culture aside, and we have developed a few toolkits. For example, the 21 culture keys, the 7 keys and the 21 agenda. Well, this has allowed us to present culture as the fourth pillar of sustainable development. And there is also a yearly organization of a culture summit where we put at the center, well, the different cultural initiatives of local and regional governments that help, well, citizens increase citizen well-being, communities' well-being. And this is, we try to interlink it with the gender perspective and the, well, all the financing, the care economy, and all of the other work that UCLG is doing. So we try to always keep this approach in all our work, to have it as a transversal focus and priority. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, that's not a question, so we save time. Yes, Muhammad.
Hello?
Who is on? Maybe Muhammad, we first give the person online. Pardon? Is the mayor?
Yes.
Okay, okay, so Madam Mayor, please go ahead.
Yeah, I wouldn't make justice to the women folk
We
without
can't
saying
hear you. Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I said I wouldn't make justice to the women folk without saying that gentleman sitting there, my dear brother, Mr. Cole, a very big thank you for understanding our challenges and understanding our issues. It is indeed true and right to say that when we fix the women, we fix the men. Our challenges are too much and urgent. And I am hoping and praying that UNCDF will come to my aid in Banjul. Please, if you want to see another mayor in Banjul, after 200 years, Banjul, the population of Banjul has done what they have to do. They elected the first time a female mayor. That is history. They come again and re-elect me again. They made history again. So that means Banjul is becoming feminist. And we should not fold our hands and leave this with me alone. I stand to understand. I now come back to my senses to understand that I cannot do this alone. I need partners, and I cannot have better partners than UNCDF, UN Habitat, UNDP, and all other UN agencies. Please, for God's sake, come to my aid so that if I am not there, you wouldn't have any conscience that will kill you. Because if I go out, there will be no woman again to come to run the affairs of that city if I don't make the impact. I have to work 3 times more than men for them to recognize my efforts. So please, for God's sake, help women mayors. I am begging partners to come to our aid. Men will not help us. Don't give them the money. Come to us if you want to have impact. We are not corrupt. We are not partisan. All what we are looking for is impact to change the life of the population. We are doing it for our next generation. Please, I am begging you. I think from today, maybe something will change. My whole hair is gray now, only for supporting women and youth. So supporting my community. Who is the community? It's the men that are living with us. We are taking care of them. Multitasking. Doing our politics. Taking care of our homes. Sending our children to school. So the partners want to tell me that they cannot see this?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor. We have had the concerns, the points that you have raised, and actually you are speaking to the right audience. We have the director of UNCDF in the room. We have the deputy in the room. We have the senior technical advisor for West Africa taking care of the Gambia in the room. We have the investment officers, you know, the senior investment manager in the room. We have everyone in this room, the partners, UN Habitat, UCLG, FMDV, everyone is in this room. We have also the universities, the professors who can come and do research and inform whatever we are doing. They are all in the room, so we take note of what you have said, and we hope we shall join our hands and do something in your city. So, Mohammed.
So thank you so much to the panelists. Mohammed Awadi, I'm the Senior Investment Manager at UNCDF. Just 3 quick points. The first one is, look, there's a whole bunch of colleagues here who are fund managers, investors, local governments, central government. It is not an option that any infrastructure investment is, planned, constructed that is not gender equitable. I mean, we are past even the economic, feasibility why this is a better business case. You know, when you have infrastructure that is responsive to the needs of women and men equitably, you have better usage of the facilities, you have more consumers, you make more revenue out of it, and it benefits the whole community. So, gender, let's say blind, planning and investments, that is of the past. I mean, this should definitely be national policy at all levels, whether it's associated with the fiscal transfers to the local governments, whether it's how local governments actually plan their resources, how the infrastructure is designed. It should all take into consideration the gender equitable aspects in doing so. And UNCDF has the Women's Economic Empowerment Index, which is an amazing instrument to look at infrastructure from a women's economic empowerment perspective, ensuring that any investment out there needs to pass those criteria. So, and we need to really make that cultural change shift and mindset shift among policymakers at central government and local government, because it is their responsibility too. But likewise, from the investor side, if you want to actually reduce the risk of the infrastructure, ensure you invest in infrastructure that is responsive to the needs of women, because that's when you maximize the usage for all society. So that is my just 2 cents on this. And lastly, I want to say that it's also a human right. That we're not here asking for an additionality to development. We talked about financing for development. No, this is also a human rights development. It is the right of everyone to be included and benefiting from all resources available. Over.
Thank you very much, and I think that clapping marks the end of this session, because we've already gone beyond the time. But I would like to thank the presenter, Samina, thank you very much for the presentation, and the panelists for the discussion and sharing the examples. This has been one of the liveliest sessions towards the end of the day. So thank you, participants, for giving us your listening ear. And I would like to mention that we are not doing the wrap-up today. We will do this tomorrow in the morning because we've run out of time. But I would like to invite the Deputy Executive Director of UN Habitat to give us closing remarks for today. Thank you.
Thanks very much, and good afternoon to you all, dear colleagues. It's always tricky, of course, to be the last speaker of the day, and I know you are a little bit tired. You are looking for the gala dinner, and you have another full day of excellent deliberations ahead of you. But I will no longer be with you tomorrow, unfortunately. I have to be in Madrid. I have a flight to catch actually in about an hour. So I will be very brief. But First and foremost, really would like to appreciate our partners, UNCDF and UCLG, and of course also FMDV and the city of Malaga for this excellent and continuous initiative that we support wholeheartely. It's an extremely important platform that we have in this context, and we are committed to continuing working with you on the same. Lenny, my colleague, will stay with you also tomorrow. He is the financing city financing person in UN Habitat, so we of course are giving you the best support that we can possibly do. What I'm taking from today's discussions is that this is an extremely important topic that, of course, we will continue working with you on very closely. I'm not a financing person. I'm not even an urban planner. I am a diplomat. I used to serve until April as Slovakia's ambassador to the United Nations in New York. And my role, even at UN Habitat, is primarily political, diplomatic. It is also focused on partnerships, on building relations, and ensuring that actually UN Habitat can really make some tangible impact that is absolutely needed. From that perspective, one of my reflections that I wanted to share with you is that I believe we need to further develop this debate and bring it further to other important stakeholders. But of course, that is true not only about this debate, but about many other debates that we are having in the context of sustainable urbanizations, SDG 11 and all that. We need to make sure that the debates really have a practical impact, and that what we are trying to achieve is actually noticed and heard by the decision makers, whether they are national governments, national parliaments, or others that of course need to take advantage of it. But of course, we need to be able to reach also the cities, the mayor communities in different parts of the world. Well, for this particular initiative, I can say that we have abandoned, together with UNCDF, the usual UN collaboration approach in favor of building a focused offering to our cities. This is a very innovative and very practical approach, which we really hope that will bring practical results. No longer do we so much care about who is doing what and how it is labeled or branded, or, you know, it's the famous silos that we, of course, often are confined to. But we really need to simply bring together our respective skills and resources to provide the full range of support needed by our cities to plan, finance, and accelerate the SDG impact. I don't need to remind you what was the most important, or at least one of the most important messages from the recent SDG summit in New York in September. It was focused on localization as a key enabler, as a key accelerator for all the SDGs, and of course on the role of local and regional governments. Translating that into practical impact is absolutely crucial. We don't have another chance for the SDGs. We only have one SDGs, and as you know, we are reaching the halfway mark, and we need to do better. Of course, we know that there was pandemic, there are challenges, there is financial economic crisis, there are conflicts and many other things. But is it a good enough excuse? I don't think so. I don't think we can get away with just stating that. We need to redouble our efforts, and of course this particular context and this work is extremely important for that as well. Secretary General actually during the SDG Summit confirmed that only about 12% of the SDGs are on track, and 50% are behind, 30% are even declining. So, of course, I don't think we need another stronger reminder of the importance of focusing our efforts, but also of what I have just said, localization and being able to bring all these efforts better to the local level, of course with the involvement of our cities, mayors, governors, but also other key local stakeholders to be able to accelerate. And of course, for that we are very much committed. You already know that there is within the UN system the so-called Local 2030 Coalition, which UN Habitat serves as permanent co-chair of, and then we have another co-chair within the UN system that is rotating. This year it is UNDP, next year it will be FAO, and then we have other co-chairs who will be coming on board. And very importantly, by the end of this month, we will have our new Local 2030 office in Bilbao, in this same country, fully operational. So we will be able to further accelerate the important work that is already going on localization. Of course, Emilia, UCLG, but also other key partners are working with us, and we are very excited about moving the local 2030 into more and more practical results. Also, it was already mentioned, today Secretary General Guterres will meet for the first time with his new advisory board on cooperation with local and regional governments. Very exciting. I cannot tell you how excited UN Habitat, UCLG, and our other partners are about that. This has been about 1.5 years of hard work on our end to prepare the ground, to really move the needle in the right direction. And of course, we want to take full advantage of the advisory board, which will comprise of 20 members, personalities, 5 from national governments and 15 from local and regional governments. That particular tweak or that particular addition was actually made by the Secretary General himself, because when we discussed with him the composition and the focus, originally the plan was 5-5-5, and then he said no, I want local and regional governments to be more forcefully represented. So it was his personal decision that the 15 representatives of the local and regional governments are there, and national governments will have 5 representatives. UN Habitat will serve as the secretariat of the advisory board. Its mandate is about 1 year, and their role will be to prepare recommendations for the Secretary General and for the member states on improved cooperation with local and regional governments in the context of more networked and more inclusive multilateralism. And those recommendations will then also feed into the Summit of the Future in September of 2024. So this is very important and very exciting for us. And of course, local finance is very much at the center of these discussions and these developments that we will be also having in the context of the advisory board. Local finance indeed is development finance. We cannot achieve the SDGs without addressing the issue of financing of local governments, access to financing mechanisms, to financing that is needed on the local level. Of course, localization would be an empty word without creating feasible conditions for the local actors to actually have access to financing that would be able to deliver on that. We see that there is money available despite the seeming abundance of finance in domestic and international capital markets. We often fail to develop projects that reach financial close. So, of course, we need to redouble our efforts in that particular context as well. While the financial challenges of cities are context-specific, they are well known, and so are many of the appropriate solutions. The challenge isn't the lack of ideas or tools, but rather the ability to match the right solution to the right city for the right program. So, and of course, in that particular context, our discussions today and tomorrow are so valuable. While we should leverage all possible funding sources for urban development, it's evident that not all sources are suitable for all cities and types of investment, obviously. So we need to make strategic choices. Of course, it's also about cities that cannot attract large-scale private investment under favorable conditions. Very importantly, regional challenges or regional differences. Only 10% of infrastructure projects in Africa reach financial close. So high project preparation costs, of course, have led to a loss of resources and attempts to attract private investment, and that can create financial traps. UN Habitat's experience shows that we must not only refine project preparation, but also focus on the financing ecosystem and the capacity of local governments to navigate it. And that's why our cooperation with UNCDF is so strategic and so important, and also so innovative that other components of the UN system often are perplexed or are often a little bit unclear about what we are actually trying to achieve. And of course, we are sparing no effort to explain also to our colleagues within the UN system what is it actually that we are trying to achieve through this cooperation, and how best to involve also others from the UN system into helping us in that context. At UN Habitat, we are promoting the need for a local financing framework to assess cities' financial situations, interdependencies of funding options, and a tailored pathway for finance, investment readiness, and external finance opportunities. We call on all development partners on this occasion and on many other occasions, but also on financial institutions and local governments, to collaborate on creating such a framework, testing it in various contexts, and providing that addressing corruption, assessing cities' financial positions comprehensively, and designing a tailored finance pathway will lead to more effective financing and greater impact. And of course, I really would like to put a lot of emphasis on the impact that we need to achieve for the people that we serve. Of course, that's the ultimate objective. In conclusion, as we stand at this pivotal moment in our journey towards the SDGs, we recognize that the challenges are immense, but it is not the time to back down. We have heard of many promising solutions today that are worthy to be scaled. There are low-hanging fruit in some areas that we can leverage if we collaborate even more effectively. And that is why this conference is so important, and that's why we will continue working with you all to improve the financial position of our cities around the world in hope of progressing also towards the overall implementation of SDGs through localization, through local solutions for local problems. Thank you very much, and I wish you very good continued debates tomorrow, and I look forward to hearing from you and from my colleagues about other developments, and of course we will very much stay connected and continue working with you. Thank you.
Okay, so we're done for the day. Thank you very much, everyone, for participating. And 3 things. One is we still have some coffee break for you to enjoy. And then second is I hope you're excited for the gala dinner. The bus will be ready in front of the hotel at 7:15. So please be ready in the lobby at 7:15. And then tomorrow, let's try to be on time. We start at 9 and try to register around between 8:30 to 9. Thank you.
Thank you for everybody online. Thank you to the interpreters, despite the delay. Wishing everyone a great end of the day, evening, and see you tomorrow. Thank you so much.